Hello everyone and welcome back to Let's Play Aladdin for the Super Nintendo. In the last one we went through the genie stage and well, Jafar got his hands on the lamp and now it's time for us to go finish off this adventure with an honestly pretty tame final level. There's some points where it's a little bit clustered in because the ceiling is pretty low, but as long as you have a sheet and have died very little across the game up to this point, you should be just dandy, barring some of the red gem placements being pretty dangerous. But even then, as long as you've found at least 50 of them up to this point, you're gonna be pretty safe. Continuing on with the game staff in the meanwhile, next up is the scroll designer, so effectively the background artists. We overall have Natsue Ueda as Nachan, Linda, who we don't know the active identity of, Naoe Nonomura, who's Nono-san, X-Mitsu, Yasuto Takahashi, Akemi Shimokawa as Shimoyan, Masako Honma as Manashi, Miki Kijima as Donchan, Chupan, who we don't know the identity of, Naomi Takemoto as Takemon, and Takapi, who we also don't know the identity of. Going down the list, Natsue Ueda started as a character designer for Little Nemo on the NES and has largely been doing exclusively background or environmental work since. Notable roles for that include Super Ghouls and Ghosts, this, Mega Man's 7, 8, X4, and Legends alongside Battle Network 6 and the entire Star Force trilogy. They also contributed background work to Onimusha's 1 and 2, some of the 3D Ace Attorneys, and many of the more recent Monster Hunter spin-offs. They were also the lead environmental artist for Mega Man 11. Next up, Naoe Nonomura started as a character designer for Black Tiger and arcades before doing background works throughout the 90s on games like Final Fight 1, Forgotten Worlds, and the Sidearms Hyperdyne games on the TurboGrafx 16 and TurboGrafx CD. Largely, though, they seemingly left the industry comparatively early. This is the chunk of this stage where things can get surprisingly dangerous, by the way, because you're just so cramped in due to the low ceilings. And Iago is also there to potentially drop a skull on you, but you need to be careful because you do need to use them as a platform to reach certain red gems. Speaking of which, the red gem directly above me and one slightly to its right are actively the hardest two to get in the game, I think, because we need to actively bait this sword thrower to throw a sword diagonally and leap off of that to get up there. And doing this is harder than it looks, and it doesn't exactly look easy, to be frank. Moving on, Yasuto Takahashi started as a background designer for Mega Man 5 before working on this game. Then they did similar work for Mega Man 7, Street Fighter 3, Strider 1 and 2, and Four Swords GBA alongside a couple of other roles, before largely becoming a character modeler or game tester, doing the former role on Gotcha Force and Street Fighter 4 3D, and the latter role for Final Fantasy XIV, starting in Stormblood through to Endwalker at the least. This was actively Akemi Shimokawa's first role in game development, at least according to Moby Games, before she did similar work on Mega Man 7, X4, and Legends alongside Breath of the Wild 4. She also contributed to another game we brought up as recently as the finale of Kingdom Hearts 1, Disney's Magical Mirror starring Mickey Mouse on the GameCube, where she once again did background design. Her most recent credit was working for Fuku Fuku LLC on the latent Ace Attorney crossover, assumedly as a freelancer doing similar work if I had to guess. Masako Honma, on the other hand, started as a character designer on Legendary Wings for the NES before largely becoming either an illustrator for Capcom outright or someone who largely did work for their publicity and packaging and manuals departments. They were a visual designer for Willow on the NES, illustrator for X1 and X4, alongside doing publicity work for much of Resident Evil's PS1 era. They did manual and package designs for games like Beautiful Joe, Resident Evil, Ultimate Ghosts and Goblins on the PSP, Street Fighter 4, Resi Revelations, and the Great Ace Attorney Chronicles, just to name a few, and to show how recently they've still been doing that work for Capcom. Next up, we have Miki Kijima. They started as a character designer for Black Tiger in arcades, but did a lot of either character sprites or background sprites for Capcom through the 90s and mid-2000s. Let's go! As I said earlier in the LP, the genie is the rarest bit on this wheel to hit in general, just because it is the smallest, but it is worthwhile to hit it because you either get an extra heart or 3 extra lives. I hit that maybe once every 3 or 4 playthroughs at best, and I don't even play this game that often to begin with. It is very hard to hit. I've heard some people say that you can actively use the genie's blinking animations to determine what you want to hit, but I've never looked too far into that because I see a roulette wheel like that, and frankly, I just stop caring. The final chunk of the stage here is definitely the most dangerous because now we have a firewall that raises and lowers periodically that we have to contend with while also moving to the right and grabbing gems. With that said, it moves generally slow enough as long as you hold down the run button where you can safely make it to the next set of platforms pretty reliably. It's only when you need to contend with the moving platforms that this can get a little scary because there's going to be points you need to pull down a chain to rotate little platforms in the background to change the tracks that the moving platforms move on. But again, as long as you go at a decent pace, you don't need to worry about it too much, though that was definitely really close. Thankfully, it's not instant kill, it just does damage, but watch out all the same. Going back to Miki Kijima, though. They did a lot of work on Mega Man's 1, 5, 6, 7, Legends 1 and 2, as well as Tron Bonne, Mega Man 1 on the Game Boy, and Battle Networks 1 to 5, alongside Other games like Pocket Fighter, Breath of Fire 1, and all that, they were all over Capcom's history in that period. Wrapping up the background artists, we have Naomi Takemoto. This was actually their first project, and they were also on the background design staff for Breath of Fire 1. They did the same thing for Street Fighter Alpha 2. Resident Evil 1, they did a lot of background and object texturing. They did some graphic design for Natsume on Rooms, the main building on the DS. They were one of many character graphics artists for King of Fighters 13 with that game's ridiculous sprite art, and their most recent role was actively being an environment artist for Paper Mario: The Origami King. Time for us to fight Jafar. Like prior enemies and bosses, we need to bounce on his head, but he's often too high to do that by default. We need to bounce up to him, either doing so off of his staff that he throws into the floor, which then sends a horizontal jolt of energy across the bottom of the screen, or off the winged pot enemies he spawns in. Every time he gets hit, he also sends lightning down on 3 consistent points on the screen, effectively dividing the room into quarters. But as you can see, if you place yourself just right, you can combo him and he doesn't stand a chance. It's hard to do that because he is pretty deliberate about his placement. You really need to get hit at a specific point to do that. But if you can do that, that is probably the easiest boss in the game. Otherwise, I'd say it's probably the hardest boss in the game, if only because the size of his sprite partnered with his movement speed means getting up to him can be kind of messy at points. But we're not done yet. It's time for the final battle. After all, there's more to the climax of the movie than just that, isn't there? Going right here brings us to our actual final boss, Jafar again. But he's not going to be fighting us as a sorcerer. It's time for us to fight a big old snake. Jumping off his head is once again the goal. We need to do so, I believe, 7 times or so. But like the previous phase, we need to bounce up there or at least wait for him to come down. He does occasionally do the latter by doing a charge attack with his head. But more often than not, you're either dealing with the bouncing eggs he spits out and then bouncing off of them to get up there, or jumping off his body when he waves it up and down to try and drag you down into the fire below. I don't think you can do the same jumping combo we just did on the previous phase here, as either his invincibility frames last longer or he's just higher up on the screen in such a way where you don't get as much time to get up there as you would prior. You can usually do about 2 hits in a row, though, depending on his attack pattern, after he does the head charge attack. Or if you time yourself well with the body movement attack, as we see right there. Honestly, pretty easy fight, but then again, this game's boss fights aren't exactly the source of difficulty. It's either getting the red gems or getting through some of the platforming sections. One more hit, and that's going to be game. But outside of the ending, I'm going to be silent for a few moments. You see, getting 50 or more red gems changes the credit sequence outright. But I want to show off both, as I actually prefer the credits when you get 49 or fewer red gems. I'll talk about my thoughts on the game overall during the latter sequence, just for the sake of simplicity towards the end of the video.
You thought you could outwit the most powerful being on Earth?
You're not as powerful as you think, Jafar. The genie has more power than you'll ever have.
His power will not exceed mine for long. Genie, here is my 3rd wish. Make me an all-powerful genie!
I have no choice. Your wish is my command, Master.
Yes! Yes! I can feel the absolute power! The universe is mine to command! Wait, what is happening to me?
Jasmine, I'm sorry I lied to you about being a prince. I know you had to do it because of that stupid law. But I love you anyway. No problem. Use your 3rd wish, Master. And zap! You're a prince again! Jasmine, I love you too, but I can't pretend to be something I'm not. I understand. Genie, my 3rd and final wish is for your freedom. Wow, I'm free! I'm free! Oh, does that feel good? Time to hit the road and see the world. Gosh, Genie, I'm sure gonna miss you. Me too, Al. No matter what anyone says, you'll always be a prince to me.
Looks like we need a new law. From this day forward, the princess may marry whomever she chooses.
Thank you, Father. I choose him, Aladdin. Just call me Al. This is wonderful! Come over here, guys. Big group hug.
And now, I'm out of here. Look out, world, here I come.
That's the credit sequence you get for getting 50 or more red gems. You effectively become a super player, and thus your reward is sequences of Aladdin doing, well, super play outright. Which is nice, but it always has felt less rewarding than the credits you get for beating the game with 49 or fewer red gems, which we're now going to actively play, which is a reprisal of the A Whole New World segment with Aladdin and Jasmine. This just feels like a more appropriate reward for doing well, but I guess it's just not as exciting. Before we talk my thoughts on the game, just to cover the remaining dev team members, because there's only a few left, the sole sound effects person on the game is Tatsuya Nishimura, who started as a composer on Bases Loaded 3. They also did music or sound effects for Street Fighter 2's home console ports in the 90s, Magical Quest starring Mickey Mouse, Breath of Fire 1, Final Fight 2, and Mega Man 7, before doing work on several non-Capcom projects, like 3 Suchi Pai games, which are strip mahjong titles, apparently. Neat, I guess. The last 3 people credited are the advisor Tokuro Fujiwara, Veronique Chantel, who did the French text translations, and Noah Dudley, who was the Disney side producer. In reverse order, Noah Dudley was also a producer on several other games like Magical Quest starring Mickey Mouse, Goofy's Hysterical History Tour, Muppet Pinball Mayhem on the Game Boy Advance, and several edutainment titles for Disney throughout the 90s. Veronique Chantel also did French text for Secret of Mana, Illusion of Gaia, Yoshi's Island, and Donkey Kong Country 2. And Tokuro Fujiwara is easily the most storied developer here, starting as a director for Puyon in arcades before performing various producing, directing, and planner roles across the late 80s and 90s. Notable projects for him were being a planner for Ghosts and Goblins on the NES, directing Bionic Commando, being a producer on Mega Man 2, producing Mega Man X's 1 through 3 and Mega Man Soccer, DuckTales, and Little Nemo, being an executive producer on both Tama titles, and being a game designer for Mad World on the Wii. That's Aladdin, though. This is a very good, if at times kind of standard, action platformer. I do prefer this to the Genesis version, even though the Genesis version I think looks better, as the music's just generally better handled, and I find the level design just more interesting to go through. It's not my go-to Disney game from this period, or even from the few years preceding it, as I'd more likely to go back to something like Darkwing Duck or the first DuckTales, but this is still really solid. If anything, it's once again like Goof Troop, very important in a bizarre way, because without this, we arguably wouldn't have Resident Evil the way we currently do, and there's just something about that that's very funny to me. Meaning, if we didn't have this game in Goof Troop, we wouldn't have all that thirst posting about Leon S. Kennedy every 2 months on social media. There's something about that I just find very funny. When I actively eventually tackle the Genesis version, I'll probably just do like a mini marathon of old Disney adjacent games again, where it's probably going to be like the Genesis version of that, The Lion King, and probably a couple of others I still haven't tackled along the way, just to cover some bases there. But that's then, this is now. The next game I'm going to do is actively another Capcom movie adaptation, though, which that part was actively planned as opposed to me doing 2 Disney games in a row. Also, by the way, if you can't tell, I actively just used a password to play the final boss again without getting many red gems, so I didn't have to do the entire game over again, hence why I only have 2 red gems out of 70. Before we end off, one bizarre little secret here, though, that I only learned about through effectively GameFAQs secret searching. When the end screen comes up here, if you wait about 20 or so minutes, Future Me will probably come in with the active time span, eventually, fireworks will start going off in the background here. It's neat. I don't know why they made you wait 20 minutes for this as opposed to maybe even like 2 or 5. But hey, it's pretty looking, I'll give it that. But with that, I'm going to need to end this off here. Thank you guys for watching, have a great night, take care, and I'll see you guys next Let's Play, whatever that may be. See you guys then.